Well, hello and welcome to Science Never Stops. I'm your host, Joseph Vick with the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, here today with NASA Marshall Space Flight Center guest, solar science astrophysicist, Dr. Sabrina Savage. Welcome, Dr. Savage, to Science Never Stops.
Hi, thanks.
All right, well, let's get started. For our viewers watching, could you please explain your field of study and tell us a little bit about some current NASA projects you're working on?
Oh, sure. As you said, I'm a solar physicist and I use space-based instrumentation to study the mechanisms behind high-energy solar events, particularly solar flares, and how they release tremendous amounts of energy in a matter of seconds and where that energy goes. And so I work on several projects that keep me quite busy, a few in particular. First, I am the U.S. lead for the Hinode Satellite Observatory, which is a Japanese-led mission designed to study the sun's surface magnetic fields at extremely high resolution, and then connect those to high-energy events taking place in the sun's atmosphere, or the corona. And Hinode pulls together institutions across the globe, so I work with a lot of international partners on that mission. I am also part of the Solar Sounding Rocket Group at Marshall, which is really fun. So we design and build instruments to explore the sun in ways no one has ever seen before or done before. And we launch those rockets from the White Sands Missile Range out in New Mexico. And those flights last about 15 minutes at a time, and then we hope that they work. And then we pick them up in a helicopter out in the desert. So that's a lot of fun to be a part of. And in fact, we just had a press release a few days ago that came out for the third flight of one of our instruments called High-C for the High Resolution Coronal Imagery. And it observed the sun's corona at the highest resolution to date. So that's a really fun program because we get to launch these instruments, and when we get images down from them right away, it's the first time that human eyes have ever seen anything like that on the sun. So that's a really fun part of my job.
So with the structure of the sun, you mentioned one part, the corona. Is the corona one of the things that you focus on the most? Could you describe to our viewers what is the corona and what's the significance of studying it?
Okay, so yeah, the corona is the outer atmosphere of the sun. And the interesting thing about the corona is that it is actually hotter than the surface of the sun, and this is called the coronal heating problem. And we've been studying this for decades in the field of solar physics. And so what's interesting about that is that you get further away from the heat source, or the core of the sun, and you get out to the surface at about 6,000 degrees, and that for some reason it ramps up to a few million degrees once you get away from the surface. It would be like if you're sitting at a campfire and you're feeling kind of cold, so you move away from the fire to get warmer. So this is a very interesting problem, and it has to do with the magnetic fields and how they are traced out from the surfaces of the sun and out into the atmosphere. And so we are actually part of the extended atmosphere of the sun. So everything that happens at the surface of the sun has profound consequences at Earth, and that's why I chose to study the corona of the sun. And the sun is truly a dynamic entity if you look closely at it, and it becomes more and more of an issue as our society has become completely dependent on technology. So flares and coronal mass ejections that happen at the sun, and coronal mass ejections, which are also called CMEs, if you've heard them term that before, are really these mountains of ionized plasma that are traveling at hundreds of miles per second away from the surface of the sun through the atmosphere, or the corona of the sun. And they can reach Earth. And they're often thrown out with these solar flares, and they can wreak havoc at Earth on communication satellites and power grids. And so you can imagine that that's a problem for industries such as airlines and utilities. And so while we are generally protected on the ground or in low Earth orbit by the Earth's magnetic shield, astronauts and spacecraft that are going to the moon or to Mars just do not have that benefit. And so it's important for us to understand what the sun is doing and what it is going to do at any given time, especially as we start to do deep space travel. And so one type of instrument is not going to to give us enough information to understand all of this at one time. But with each answer that we get, we find a whole load of new questions because the sun is incredibly complex and dynamic. And so, but beyond all that, I really like to study the sun because it's just this fantastic physics laboratory, and it's really beautiful when you look at it. It's an average star, but it's right on our doorstep, and so the more we learn about it, the more we can actually learn about the universe in general. So.
All right. It may be average in the universe, but it's above average in our hearts.
That's right. It's the source of all energy in our solar system, so it's quite important to us.
Indeed. Could you tell us a little bit about your educational background and how that educational background helped you obtain your current NASA position?
Oh, yeah. So I actually started out with my bachelor's degree in physics from the University of South Alabama down in Mobile. And then I got my master's at the University of Wyoming, and I got my PhD from Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana. And then I did a postdoc out at Goddard Space Flight Center before I ended up at Marshall Space Flight Center. So I have really been on a direct track to get to NASA all along. But what I majored in was physics, and I also minored in math. And I learned and picked up some engineering along the way. But what I would say the most important things that I learned were math, physics, of course, and even chemistry, but also writing code and how to do data analysis, and also public speaking and technical writing and reading and English and foreign languages even helped me. And also physical fitness, because we had to go out and get the payloads out in the desert, for instance. And also when I was working at the observatories in Wyoming, we had to snowshoe out to the observatory sometimes. So it all comes into play.
Well, growing up, was there a certain class or extracurricular activity, mentor, or experience that helped shape your career path?
Oh, that's hard to say because there were so many things along the way. I really started on my career path when I was in third grade, and my teacher gave us a project to explore the solar system and put together our little pamphlets for the solar system, and I went overboard. So that really started it. But I would say for something that other people could also take advantage of was an RU program. And that stands for Research Experience for Undergraduates, and they're offered at many universities across the U.S. I participated in one at the University of Wyoming while I was an undergrad at South Alabama, actually. And that really helped to solidify what my career path would be. So that's where I got my first hands-on experience for using ground-based observatories on one of the mountains out there and also on one of the buttes. And I learned to create my own data analysis software. And I also figured out how tedious science really was, but that just set me up for a good foundation there. And plus, it opened my world to travel, because before that, I had not lived anywhere outside of the Southeast. And since then, I've lived in several parts of the country. I've visited 43 states plus DC, and I've traveled to 14 other nations on 5 different continents, and mostly those were solo trips. So I found travel to be one of the single most important things that I could have done to open my mind to different ways of thinking, and really, that's an incredibly important part of science. So it's just these very peripheral things that you wouldn't think was a direct impact on my career, but it really was.
Well, with your academic career and current career, and with science, sometimes you have some bumps in the road. So what would you say would be your biggest academic or career setback, and what did you do to overcome it?
Okay, so and this one isn't just me personally, it was a team setback. There's definitely one experience that I can relate to this. And so one of our team's second flight of the high-C rocket did not go as planned. So there was a short in one of the wires that occurred after all of our testing, and we had buttoned it up. And it was actually during that buttoning up process that resulted in a short in the wire. And what that meant is that the shutter of our camera did not open. And so we got a lot of images of the back of the shutter instead of the sun. And I had not experienced a failure like that before. It was so deflating that such a tiny piece of equipment one little wire could derail 4 years of incredibly hard work. But we learned from that experience and figured out how to test for failures like that before flight for the next ones. And we were fortunate enough to refly, and we're very successful the second time around. So what I thought was maybe the end of the world turned out not to be, and we had a lot of lessons learned. And in science in general, we experienced rejection a lot through the proposal process, but what I've learned is that it's not, a lot of things are beyond our control. And what we can do is learn from the things that are in control and improve upon that. So, yes, science is definitely up and down.
And sometimes failure to a scientist can lead to even greater discovery.
Absolutely, because now with our next payloads, we know what to do to make sure it's working before our flight.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of scientists, who would you say is your favorite scientist and why?
Hands down, Carl Sagan. And that's because not only was he a brilliant person in general, he brought the universe into everyone's home and made it accessible. And that's something that I would like to strive for.
Did you watch Cosmos?
Of course.
Yep.
Yes.
Do you happen to have any special abilities, talents, or hobbies that might surprise people?
I love gardening. So what I say is most days I come to bed and I have dirt hands. But if I can grow things in Alabama clay, then I should definitely be picked to help terraform Mars.
Great. So my undergrad is in plant ecology, so I'm a gardener as well. So I feel
fantastic. So you understand?
I do. So I had a personal connection with the Martian, Mark Watney, being the botanist on the surface of Mars. Okay,
that's right. That's what I want to be.
Yep. And the sun is very important for plant growth too. So
exactly,
that's a very good connection.
Exactly.
Now, do you happen to have a personal motto or a bit of advice that you would like to pass along to the next generation of NASA career individuals?
So I have two. One of my favorite writers is Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, of course. And one of his quotes that I love is, "I take the awe of understanding over the awe of ignorance any day." And I really live by that one. The other one is my own, and it's plan is a 4-letter word. So you need to be adaptable in any situation.
Two very good pieces of literary and personal advice to pass along. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add or say or describe to our viewers?
Well, yes, there was one question that I thought you were going to ask. Star Trek or Star Wars, right?
Yep. Which one? Which
Doctor
one?
Who.
The TARDIS. Yes. There you go. So if you're going that route, which Doctor is your favorite?
Oh, number 10. 10 for Tenet.
There you go.
Yes.
You are a treasure now that I know that you are a gardener, a solar scientist, and a Whovian.
Absolutely.
Great.
That's my life in a nutshell right there.
So if you had the opportunity, let's say the next regeneration of the Doctor appeared in your laboratory, would you be a companion of the Doctor?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt. Everybody, my whole family is ready for me to go. They know.
Well, all right. Well, thank you again, Dr. Savage, for joining us today. And for our viewers, remember, science never stops.